The board meeting was running late, as it often did when Marcus Harrington, CEO of Apex Technologies, was at the helm. The evening sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan skyscraper as Marcus delivered his closing remarks with the precision and confidence that had helped him build a $4.2 billion empire from scratch. Gentlemen, ladies, our third-quarter projections exceed expectations by 17%. The Shanghai expansion is ahead of schedule, and our competitors are scrambling to keep up. As always, I expect nothing less than excellence from each division. Marcus closed his leather portfolio with a decisive snap that echoed through the suddenly silent boardroom. The tension was palpable. No one moved until Marcus nodded, signaling the end of the meeting. As executives gathered their materials and filtered out, Marcus remained standing, his 6'2" frame still commanding attention even as people departed. His executive assistant, Diane, approached with a stack of papers and his evening schedule. "Mr. Harrington, you have dinner with the Japanese investors at 8, and the London team needs a response on—" The sharp ring of Marcus's personal phone cut through Diane's briefing. He frowned, pulling the device from his pocket. Unknown number. He typically ignored such calls, but something, intuition perhaps, made him raise a finger to pause. "Diane." "Harrington," he answered, his voice clipped and businesslike. "Mr. Harrington, this is Melissa Cooper from Brightwater's kindergarten." The woman's voice sounded strained, professional, but with an underlying current of concern. "I'm calling about your son, Ethan." Marcus's expression didn't change, but his grip on the phone tightened. "I believe you have the wrong number. I don't have a son." A pause. "Sir, I'm looking at our records. Ethan Harrington, age 5. You're listed as his father and emergency contact. He's the only child still waiting to be picked up, and we've been trying to reach his mother for the past hour." The chill that ran down Marcus's spine had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. "There's been a mistake. I don't have any children." His voice remained even, betraying none of the confusion swirling inside him. "Mr. Harrington, I understand this is unusual, but Ethan specifically mentioned you today. He's drawn a picture of you, which he described in some detail. He even knows where you work." Marcus walked to the window, turning his back on the now empty boardroom. 43 stories below, New York City was transforming into its nighttime self, a glittering carpet of lights and possibilities. His reflection stared back at him, immaculate navy suit, precisely trimmed salt and pepper hair, the epitome of success and control, childless, always childless. "This is absurd," he said, more sharply than intended. "I've never been married, and I certainly don't have a 5-year-old son." The kindergarten administrator's voice grew more urgent. "Sir, I understand your confusion, but there's a little boy here who's getting increasingly upset. Perhaps you could just come and see him. If there's been a mix-up, we can sort it out. But he's asking for his daddy, and he described you perfectly. My name is Theo Teller, and if this introduction has already piqued your curiosity, leave your light to follow the unfolding of this mysterious journey. Which city are you watching this from? Let us know in the comments below." Something inexplicable pulled at Marcus, a strange compulsion he couldn't identify or explain. Against every logical instinct, he heard himself saying, "Text me the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes." He ended the call and turned to find Diane watching him with concern. "Cancel my dinner," he said, reaching for his coat. "Something's come up." "But sir, the Japanese investors have flown in specifically to—" "Cancel it," he repeated, his tone allowing no argument. "Reschedule for tomorrow. Tell them it's a family emergency." The words felt foreign in his mouth. Family emergency. Marcus Harrington didn't have family emergencies because Marcus Harrington didn't have a family. His parents were long dead, he had no siblings, and at 48, he'd long ago accepted that his company was his only child. Yet, 30 minutes later, his chauffeur-driven Bentley pulled up outside Brightwater's kindergarten, a cheerful red brick building that stood in stark contrast to the glass and steel world he inhabited. The school appeared closed for the day, but a warm light glowed from within. Marcus adjusted his tie, a nervous habit from his early days in business, and walked toward the entrance, his mind racing through possibilities, each more implausible than the last. As he reached for the door, it swung open to reveal a harried-looking woman in her 40s. "Mr. Harrington, I'm Melissa Cooper. Thank you for coming." She extended her hand, which he shook automatically. "They want to be clear," Marcus said, his voice low and controlled. "I'm here to resolve what is obviously a case of mistaken identity. I don't have a son." Melissa nodded, but something in her expression suggested skepticism. "Of course. Please come this way." She led him through brightly decorated hallways, festooned with children's artwork, until they reached a classroom, where a small boy sat at a tiny table, hunched over a drawing. The child's shoulders were slumped in the universal posture of abandonment. Something tightened in Marcus's chest. At the sight, an unfamiliar, uncomfortable sensation. "Ethan?" Melissa called softly. "Someone's here to see you." The boy turned, and Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. The boy's eyes were the exact shade of startling emerald green that Marcus saw in the mirror every morning. A distinctive Harrington trait that had skipped generations before appearing in Marcus himself. The child's hair was dark like his own, though softer, more reminiscent of how Marcus's had been in the few surviving childhood photos from his own youth. "Daddy!" The boy's face transformed instantly, lighting up with such genuine joy that Marcus felt momentarily stunned. Ethan scrambled off his chair and ran toward him, arms outstretched. Marcus stiffened, taking an involuntary step backward. "Wait!" But the boy had already wrapped his arms around Marcus's legs, burying his face against the expensive wool of his trousers. "I knew you'd come. Mommy said you might be too busy, but I told her you'd come for me." Marcus looked desperately at Melissa, who was watching the scene with a mixture of confusion and relief. "There's clearly been some sort of mistake," he said, trying to gently disentangle himself from the child's embrace without seeming cruel. Melissa frowned. "Mr. Harrington, I understand this is unusual, but Ethan has been enrolled in our school for 3 months now. His records list you as his father. We have a copy of his birth certificate." "That's impossible," Marcus insisted, though a cold feeling was spreading through his chest. "May I see these records?" Melissa nodded. "Of course. Please come to my office. Ethan, would you like to finish your drawing while I talk to Mr. Harrington?" The boy finally released Marcus's legs, looking up with those unsettlingly familiar green eyes. "Okay, I'm drawing our house, Daddy. The big one with the swimming pool where I'm going to live with you someday." Marcus felt the hairs on his neck stand up. He had indeed recently purchased a Connecticut estate with an indoor pool, a property that had not been publicized and that few people knew about. It was supposed to be a weekend retreat from the city, though he'd yet to find time to actually use it. That's very nice," he managed to say, following Melissa to her office while trying to process what was happening. Once they were alone, Melissa pulled up Ethan's file on her computer and turned the screen toward Marcus. "Here's his registration information. Mother, Catherine Wells. Father, Marcus Harrington. Emergency contacts, both parents, plus a grandmother on the mother's side." Marcus scanned the document, blood pounding in his ears. "Catherine Wells," he repeated, the name stirring something deep in his memory. "Yes. She enrolled Ethan at the beginning of the semester. She mentioned that you and she were not together, but that you had agreed to be part of Ethan's life. She seemed quite certain about your involvement." Marcus loosened his tie, suddenly feeling the need for air. Catherine Wells. The name transported him back nearly 6 years to a charity gala in Boston. He'd been there to receive an award for corporate philanthropy. Catherine had been a young but promising corporate attorney whose firm had sponsored the event. They had connected instantly, a rare occurrence for Marcus, who typically kept people at arm's length. Their affair had been brief but intense, 3 months of uncharacteristic passion before Marcus had ended it, citing his inability to commit to anything beyond his company. Catherine had taken it with surprising grace, though her parting words returned to him now with haunting clarity. Someday, Marcus, something will come into your life that matters more than that tower of glass and steel. I hope you recognize it when it does. Had she been pregnant when they parted ways? It was possible they had been careful, but not always. The timing would match Ethan's age. But why wouldn't she have told him? And more pressingly, why was she now apparently using his name as the child's father without his knowledge or consent? Where is Catherine now? Marcus asked, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. Melissa's expression grew troubled. That's what's concerning us. She always picks Ethan up promptly at 4:30. Today she didn't come, hasn't answered any calls, and hasn't responded to our messages. It's now after 7 p.m. and we've exhausted all other emergency contacts. Her mother didn't answer either. And Ethan? What has he said about his mother? Only that she told him this morning that today might be different, and he might get to see his daddy instead. Melissa hesitated. Mr. Harrington, if you're claiming no knowledge of this child, we may need to contact Child Protective Services, unless you're willing to take responsibility for him while we locate Ms. Wells. The suggestion sent a jolt of panic through Marcus. Take responsibility for a child. He ran a global technology corporation. His days were scheduled to the minute. He lived in a minimalist penthouse designed for a single man with no interest in family life. Yet something about the boy's eyes, his own eyes, and the genuine delight with which Ethan had greeted him stirred emotions Marcus had long thought himself incapable of feeling. And if Catherine was truly missing, I'll need to confirm paternity, of course, he said, business instincts kicking in despite his inner turmoil. But yes, I'll take him for tonight. I'll have my legal team look into this situation immediately. Relief washed over Melissa's face. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I'll need you to sign some forms, and then you can take Ethan home. Do you have what you need for a 5-year-old? Car seat, children's food, appropriate sleeping arrangements. The reality of what he was agreeing to hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had none of those things, knew nothing about caring for a child. Yet he found himself saying, I'll make the necessary arrangements. He stepped out of the office to make a quick call to his most trusted assistant. Diane, I need you to purchase and deliver to my penthouse immediately a child's car seat suitable for a 5-year-old boy. Also, whatever food children that age eat, pajamas and, he lowered his voice, whatever else a child might need for an overnight stay. And find me the best family attorney in the city. I need them on standby. After completing the paperwork, which felt surreal to sign, Marcus returned to the classroom, where Ethan was putting the finishing touches on his drawing. Ethan, Melissa said gently, Mr. Harrington is going to take you to his home tonight while we try to contact your mother. The boy beamed up at Marcus. I get to see your house? The one in the sky that you told Mommy about? Another chill ran through Marcus. He had indeed once described his penthouse that way to Catherine. Yes, he said, feeling as though he were moving through a dream. The one in the sky. Ethan carefully folded his drawing and held it out to Marcus. I made this for you. Marcus accepted the paper and unfolded it to find a childish but recognizable rendering of his Connecticut estate, complete with the distinctive curved indoor pool that had been a key selling point. Next to the house stood 2 stick figures, one tall with black hair, one small holding hands. That's you and me, Ethan explained unnecessarily. Mommy says I'm going to live with you soon because she has to go away for a long time. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. Did she say where she was going? Ethan shrugged. Just that she was sick and needed special doctors, and that you promised to take care of me when she couldn't anymore. Marcus and Melissa exchanged alarmed glances. Ethan, Marcus said, kneeling down to the boy's level despite his expensive suit, when did your mother tell you this? This morning. The boy's lower lip trembled slightly. She cried a lot and hugged me extra tight. She said she was sorry she didn't tell you about me sooner, but that you'd understand when you saw me. His voice dropped to a whisper. Am I going to live with you now? For real? Marcus looked into those eerily familiar green eyes and felt something crack open inside him, a place he'd kept sealed shut for decades. Let's get you to my home first, and then we'll figure everything out. Okay? Ethan nodded solemnly, then slipped his small hand into Marcus's much larger one, with complete trust. The sensation was foreign, alarming, and somehow right. As they walked toward the exit, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text. His driver was waiting outside with the car seat Diane had somehow procured in record time. Real-world logistics were kicking in, grounding what still felt like an impossible situation. Mr. Harrington, Melissa called as they reached the door. If you do manage to contact Catherine, please let us know immediately. Marcus nodded, the gravity of the situation settling fully on his shoulders. Something was very wrong here. Catherine Wells had apparently been planning this handoff, and if she was truly ill, as Ethan suggested. Come on, Ethan, he said, squeezing the small hand in his own. Let's go home. The boy looked up at him with perfect trust and smiled. I knew you'd come for me, Daddy. Mommy promised you would. No good to all. The ride back to Marcus's penthouse was surreal. His sleek black Bentley, usually a sanctuary of leather-scented silence, now contained a chattering 5-year-old, securely buckled into a brand-new car seat. His driver, James, had raised an eyebrow, but maintained his professional composure when Marcus emerged from the kindergarten, holding Ethan's hand. To the penthouse, sir? James had asked, opening the rear door. Yes, Marcus replied, helping Ethan into the car seat with awkward movements. He'd never installed a child's car seat before, and the complexity of the straps and buckles frustrated him momentarily until James quietly stepped in to assist. Now, as they navigated the evening Manhattan traffic, Marcus surreptitiously studied the boy who claimed to be his son. The resemblance was undeniable. Those distinctive green eyes, the shape of his jaw, even the way his brow furrowed slightly when he concentrated on describing something. It was like looking at an old photograph of himself, reanimated and filled with an innocence he couldn't remember ever possessing. And Mommy says your building has an elevator that goes super duper fast, like whoosh, Ethan was saying, making a zooming gesture with his hand. Does it really go 100 miles an hour? Marcus found himself smiling despite the tension coiling in his chest. Not quite that fast, but it is one of the fastest residential elevators in the city. What's residential? It means where people live, as opposed to where they work. Ethan nodded seriously, filing away this new vocabulary. Mommy says you're very smart. She says you build computers that think like people. Another accurate detail. Apex Technologies' main product line was artificial intelligence systems designed to mimic human decision-making processes. The company had revolutionized several industries with its predictive algorithms. Your mother seems to know a lot about me, Marcus said carefully. What else has she told you? Ethan looked down at his small hands. She shows me your pictures in the magazines, and sometimes we watch videos of you talking on the computer. She says I have your eyes and your smarts. He glanced up. Do you think I'm smart like you, Daddy? The word Daddy still sent a shock through Marcus's system, but he managed to respond evenly. I'm sure you are very intelligent, Ethan. Yeah. Mommy says I can go to MIT someday, like you did. Marcus felt the hairs on his neck rise again. His MIT background was public knowledge, but Catherine's detailed education of the boy about his life felt deliberate, almost tactical. What exactly had she been planning? As they approached his building, Marcus's phone rang. He checked the screen. Diane. Yes, he answered. Sir, I've arranged for the items you requested. They've been delivered to your penthouse. I also took the liberty of contacting Olivia Chen. She's the top family law attorney in the city, as you asked. She's agreed to meet with you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Thank you, Diane. And Has there been any news about Catherine Wells? A pause. Sir, I've done some preliminary searching based on the information you provided. There's something you should know. Catherine Wells was admitted to Memorial Sloan Kettering 3 weeks ago. Cancer ward. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, the pieces starting to fall into place. I see. Get me everything you can on her condition. And Diane, this stays absolutely confidential. Of course, sir. He ended the call as the Bentley pulled up to his building. The doorman's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Marcus Harrington with a child in tow, something no one in the exclusive building had ever witnessed. But he quickly schooled his features. Good evening, Mr. Harrington, he said, opening the car door. Evening, Thomas. This is Ethan. He'll be staying with me. Whether Thomas thought Ethan was a relative, the child of a friend, or something else entirely, he gave no indication. Very good, sir. Shall I have anything sent up? No, thank you. Some deliveries have already arrived. The elevator ride was indeed fast, though nowhere near the 100 miles an hour Ethan had anticipated. The boy still gasped in delight as they shot up to the penthouse level, his face pressed against the glass wall that offered a view of the city falling away beneath them. We're flying, he exclaimed. Almost, Marcus agreed, finding himself charmed despite the gravity of the situation. When the elevator doors opened directly into his penthouse foyer, Ethan's mouth formed a perfect O of astonishment. The space before them was a masterpiece of modern design, all clean lines, strategic lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering Manhattan skyline. It was a space designed for a successful single man, with little consideration for comfort or warmth. Wow, Ethan breathed. It's like a spaceship. Marcus had never thought of his home that way, but seeing it through a child's eyes, he could understand the comparison. The sleek furniture, minimalist decor, and abundance of technology did lend it a futuristic quality. True to her word, Diane had arranged for deliveries. Several bags from high-end children's stores sat neatly arranged in the foyer, alongside a smaller bag from a gourmet market that presumably contained child-appropriate food. Are you hungry? Marcus asked, realizing he had no idea when the boy had last eaten. Ethan nodded enthusiastically. Can we have pizza? Mommy only lets me have it on special days, but she said today was the most special day. The comment sent another chill through Marcus. The more Ethan spoke, the more it seemed Catherine had been preparing him for this transition. But why now? Why like this? I think we can manage pizza, Marcus said, reaching for his phone to place an order. He hadn't eaten delivery pizza in years, possibly decades, but tonight seemed like an appropriate exception. While they waited for the food to arrive, Marcus showed Ethan around the penthouse, carefully steering him away from his home office and the more fragile art pieces. The boy moved through the space with curiosity but surprising care, seeming to sense that this was an adult environment where roughhousing wasn't appropriate. In the guest bedroom, Marcus unpacked the bags Diane had sent, finding child-sized pajamas, toiletries, a few changes of clothes, and even a small selection of toys and books. The level of detail she'd managed to arrange on such short notice reminded him why she was the highest-paid executive assistant in New York. After they'd eaten pizza directly from the box at Marcus's usually pristine dining table, another first, and Ethan had been bathed and dressed in new dinosaur-patterned pajamas, Marcus faced the challenge of bedtime. He'd prepared the guest room with fresh linens and arranged the new stuffed animals Diane had purchased in what he hoped was an inviting manner. Time for bed, he announced, feeling oddly authoritative about a process he knew nothing about. To his surprise, Ethan didn't protest. Instead, he asked, "Can I call Mommy to say goodnight? We always say goodnight." Marcus hesitated. "I'm not sure we can reach her tonight, Ethan. She might be resting." He was reluctant to explain the situation further without more information. Ethan's lower lip trembled. But what if she's scared without me? She gets scared sometimes when the doctors do the scary things. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. He sat on the edge of the bed, motioning for Ethan to join him. Ethan, can you tell me more about your mother being sick? What kind of sick is she? The boy climbed onto the bed, his small face suddenly solemn. She has the bad sick that made her hair fall out. She wears special hats now, but sometimes at home she doesn't wear them, and her head is all smooth. He demonstrated by running his hand over his own head. She says the medicine makes her very tired and sometimes makes her tummy hurt, but that it's fighting the bad things inside her. Cancer. Almost certainly. Marcus felt a heaviness settle over him. Has she been sick for a long time? Ethan nodded. She started getting really sick after my birthday. That was in June, 4 months ago. And apparently Catherine had been planning for this handoff, preparing Ethan to transition to a father he'd never met, but had been taught to recognize and trust. Ethan, I'm going to try to find out how your mother is doing. Tomorrow, okay? But for tonight, you should get some sleep. The boy looked up at him with those startlingly familiar green eyes. Will you stay until I fall asleep? Mommy always does. Marcus had conference calls scheduled with Asia, documents to review, emails to answer, his usual evening workload. But looking at the small face before him, the work that had defined his existence for decades suddenly seemed less urgent. Yes, he said, surprising himself. I'll stay. Ethan smiled and crawled under the covers, clutching a new stuffed elephant that Diane had included in her purchases. Mommy says you work too hard. She says that's why you didn't know about me before, because you were too busy making your company. But she said someday you'd have time for me. Marcus felt a complicated mix of emotions surge through him. Guilt, anger at Catherine for keeping this child from him, confusion about her motives, and somewhere beneath it all, a strange, unfamiliar warmth at the thought that this boy, who might very well be his son, had been waiting to meet him. I'm here now, he said softly, the words feeling both foreign and true. Ethan's eyes were already drooping. Good night, Daddy, he murmured. Good night, Ethan, Marcus replied, watching as the boy's breathing slowed and deepened into sleep. He remained seated on the edge of the bed long after Ethan had fallen asleep, watching the rise and fall of the small chest, studying the features that so eerily mirrored his own. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, DNA tests, hospital visits, and a reckoning with Catherine Wells. But tonight, in the quiet of his usually empty penthouse, Marcus Harrington confronted the possibility that his life was about to change in ways he could never have anticipated when he woke up this morning. Marcus woke before dawn, his internal clock immune to the previous day's disruptions. For a moment, lying in his king-sized bed with the familiar city skyline visible through the wall of windows, he almost convinced himself that yesterday had been a dream. Some strange hallucination born of overwork and isolation. Then he heard it. A soft cough from the guest bedroom. Ethan. The boy was real. The situation was real. And today, Marcus would need to untangle the bizarre circumstances that had brought a 5-year-old, who might be his son, into his ordered, solitary life. He reached for his phone, noting several urgent emails that had arrived overnight from the Tokyo office. Ordinarily, he would address them immediately, but today they seemed strangely distant, problems belonging to a different life. Instead, he opened a message from Diane sent at 2:17 a.m. Sir, I've gathered the information you requested regarding Catherine Wells. She was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in June. Treatment at Memorial Sloan Kettering began immediately, but her condition has deteriorated rapidly in recent weeks. She was admitted as an inpatient 3 weeks ago. Her prognosis is not good. I've arranged for a private investigator to obtain more details, particularly regarding Ethan's birth certificate and any legal documents pertaining to guardianship. Olivia Chen is confirmed for 8 a.m. at your penthouse. I've also taken the liberty of rescheduling your meetings through noon. Marcus set the phone down, absorbing the information. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The words carried a brutal finality he understood all too well. His own father had died of the same disease when Marcus was in college, a swift, merciless decline that had left no time for reconciliations or proper goodbyes. And now Catherine, vibrant, brilliant Catherine, who had walked away from him with such dignity 6 years ago, was dying. Had perhaps already died, leaving their son, in his care through this elaborate, desperate arrangement. The realization that she might have been carrying his child when they parted ways hit him with physical force. Why hadn't she told him? Pride? Fear of rejection? Or had she simply looked at the man he was then, driven, ambitious, emotionally unavailable, and decided her child deserved better? A soft knock at his bedroom door interrupted his thoughts. "Daddy, are you awake?" Ethan's small voice called. Marcus glanced at the clock, 6:22 a.m. "Yes, come in," he called, sitting up and adjusting his silk pajamas. The door cracked open, and Ethan peered in, still in his dinosaur pajamas, hair tousled from sleep, clutching the stuffed elephant. "I had a dream about Mommy," he said, his voice small. "She was in the garden at Grandma's house, but when I tried to hug her, she kept getting farther away." Marcus felt woefully unprepared for this moment. He'd never comforted a child, had no frame of reference for how to address nightmares or anxiety, but something instinctive took over. "Come here," he said, patting the bed beside him. Ethan padded across the room and climbed onto the high bed with some effort. Once settled, he looked around the massive bedroom with wide eyes. "Your bed is like a swimming pool," he observed. Despite everything, Marcus found himself smiling. "It is rather large," he agreed. "Can I stay here with you until it's really morning?" Ethan asked. "Mommy lets me stay in her bed when I have scary dreams." "Yes, that's fine." Marcus checked his watch again. "But I need to get ready soon. I have an important meeting here at 8 o'clock. Ethan nodded solemnly. "Is it about me?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "What makes you think that?" "Mommy said that when I came to live with you, there might be lots of meetings with people in suits who would ask questions. She said not to be scared, because they're just making sure everything is done right." Another piece of the puzzle. Catherine had prepared the boy remarkably well for this transition. "Yes," Marcus admitted. "It is about you, in a way. About making sure you're taken care of properly." Ethan seemed to accept this, settling back against the pillows. "Mommy said you have people who help you with everything because you're very important. Do you have someone who makes breakfast? Mommy says you probably don't cook." Marcus had to smile at Catherine's accurate assessment. "I usually just have coffee," he admitted. "But I'm sure we can find something for you to eat." He reached for his phone. "My assistant Diane can arrange." "I like Cheerios," Ethan offered helpfully, "with bananas cut up in it, and milk, but not too much milk or it gets soggy too fast." Such a specific, ordinary request from this extraordinary child who had appeared in his life overnight. "Cheerios it is," Marcus said, messaging Diane to add the cereal to her already extensive list of tasks for the day. An hour later, Marcus was showered and dressed in one of his impeccable suits, watching with fascination as Ethan sat at his dining table, carefully eating Cheerios from a bowl, delivered promptly by Diane along with a week's worth of child-appropriate groceries. The domesticity of the scene was surreal, like a movie about someone else's life playing out in his home. "Ethan," Marcus said carefully, "the person coming to meet with us today is a lawyer. She's going to help us figure out some important things about you staying with me." Ethan looked up, milk dripping from his spoon. Am I going to live here forever now? In the sky house? Marcus hesitated. Without confirmation of paternity, without knowing Catherine's exact condition or what legal arrangements she might have made, he couldn't make promises. Yet, looking at those familiar green eyes, he found himself unwilling to introduce more uncertainty into the child's life. We're going to figure everything out, he said, but for now, yes, you're staying with me. Ethan's face brightened. Can I see the swimming pool house too? The one in my drawing? Yes, perhaps this weekend. The words came automatically, as though Marcus had been making weekend plans with a child for years instead of hours. The penthouse intercom buzzed precisely at 8 o'clock. Sir, Ms. Chen is here, announced the doorman. Send her up, Marcus replied. He turned to Ethan. After you finish your breakfast, would you like to watch some television while I talk to Ms. Chen? Ethan nodded. Mommy lets me watch PBS Kids or Disney Junior, but only for 1 hour, then I have to do learning activities. Marcus made a mental note to ask Diane to research appropriate children's programming and learning activities, whatever those might be. That sounds reasonable, he said, guiding Ethan to the seldom-used media room, where a massive television dominated one wall. After setting up a children's program that Ethan recognized with delight, Marcus returned to the living room just as the elevator doors opened to reveal Olivia Chen, a formidable woman in her 50s, wearing a sharp charcoal suit and carrying a sleek briefcase. Mr. Harrington, she greeted him, extending her hand. Quite the situation you've found yourself in. Indeed, Marcus replied, shaking her hand. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Your assistant was quite persuasive and generous with your retainer. She glanced around the penthouse. Is he here? Yes, watching television in the other room. Good. We have much to discuss. She set her briefcase on the coffee table and removed several folders. Based on the preliminary information your assistant provided, I've already put some wheels in motion. First, I've arranged for a DNA test to confirm paternity. The results can be expedited and available within 48 hours. Good, Marcus said. Though he found himself strangely certain of what those results would show, the resemblance was too striking, the timing too perfect. Second, I've obtained copies of Ethan's birth certificate. She slid a document across the table. As you can see, you are indeed listed as the father, though it appears you didn't sign the document yourself. Marcus examined the certificate. Ethan Alexander Harrington, born June 12, 2020, at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. Mother Catherine Elizabeth Wells, father Marcus James Harrington. She used my name without my knowledge or consent, he said, in old anger stirring. Yes, which is legally problematic, but perhaps understandable given the circumstances. Olivia opened another folder. Now, regarding Ms. Wells's current situation, my sources at Memorial Sloan Kettering confirm she's in the final stages of pancreatic cancer. Her oncologist estimates she has days, perhaps weeks at most. The clinical assessment hit Marcus harder than he expected. Catherine, brilliant, passionate Catherine, reduced to a grim medical timeline. Has she made any legal arrangements for Ethan? He asked. That's where things get interesting. Olivia extracted another document. 3 months ago, she filed for a modification to Ethan's birth certificate to add you as the father, which was granted since you weren't listed as father unknown, but by name. Simultaneously, she filed these guardianship papers, naming you as Ethan's guardian in the event of her incapacitation or deaths. Marcus took the papers, scanning them with growing disbelief. But I never signed these. I never agreed to this. The court approved them provisionally, Olivia explained. In such cases, if the named guardian isn't present to accept or refuse, the court often approves temporarily with the understanding that the guardian can petition for relief if they choose to decline responsibility. So, legally, upon Catherine Wells's death or legal incapacitation, you become Ethan's guardian, unless you actively petition to relinquish that responsibility. She studied him carefully. Which, of course, is your right. The words hung in the air between them. His right to walk away from the boy with his eyes, who was at this moment happily watching cartoons in the next room. His right to return to his orderly, child-free existence. There's something else, Olivia continued when Marcus remained silent. Ms. Wells left this for you. She handed over a sealed envelope. It was included with the legal paperwork, to be delivered to you upon execution of the guardianship. Marcus took the envelope, Catherine's familiar handwriting visible on the front. For Marcus, please read alone. I'll need some time to process all this, he said, setting the letter aside for now. Of course, but there are some immediate practical matters to address. Ethan's schooling, childcare arrangements, possible modifications to your living and working arrangements. Olivia paused. Unless, of course, you're planning to decline guardianship. The question demanded an answer he wasn't prepared to give. Somewhere deep in the rigid architecture of Marcus Harrington's carefully constructed life, something was shifting, foundations cracking, walls trembling. I'd like to visit Catherine, he said instead. Today, if possible. Olivia nodded. I anticipated that. I've arranged for visiting privileges at Memorial Sloan Kettering. You're cleared to go any time after 10 this morning. She gathered her papers. I'll proceed with the DNA testing and begin preparations for both possibilities, either accepting or declining guardianship. We can meet again once you've made your decision. After Olivia departed, Marcus stood at his wall of windows, looking out over the city he had conquered through sheer will and relentless focus. Behind him, the faint sounds of children's programming drifted from the media room, an alien soundtrack to his previously silent domain. Stories like these remind us of life's unexpected turns and the choices that define us. If you believe in second chances and new beginnings, consider subscribing to not miss what happens next. He reached for Catherine's letter, turning the envelope in his hands. Whatever explanations or accusations it contained, he wasn't ready to face them yet. First, he needed to see her, to understand why she had kept his son from him for 5 years, only to thrust the boy into his life now when she was running out of time. Taking a deep breath, Marcus made a decision that went against every instinct he'd cultivated over his successful but solitary life. He walked to the media room, where Ethan was giggling at some animated antics on the screen. Ethan, he said, how would you like to go on an important journey with me today? The boy looked up, those familiar green eyes, his eyes, alight with curiosity and trust. Where are we going? To see your mother. Marcus had never been good at waiting. Throughout his career, he'd cultivated an environment where things happened on his schedule, where doors opened as he approached, where decisions were made at his pace. But hospitals operated by different rules, serving a higher authority than corporate power. So he waited, uncomfortable in a plastic chair in the hospital corridor, while Ethan visited his mother under the watchful eye of a compassionate nurse. When they'd arrived at Memorial Sloan Kettering, the oncology staff had gently suggested that Catherine might not be strong enough for multiple visitors at once, especially given the emotionally charged nature of the reunion. She's been asking for Ethan, Dr. Reynolds had explained quietly, her eyes showing both professional detachment and human sympathy. But her condition is fragile. I would suggest letting the boy see her first. It will give you both a chance to prepare for your conversation. Reluctantly, Marcus had agreed, kneeling awkwardly to Ethan's level in the hospital corridor. You're going to see Mommy now, he'd explained. I'll wait out here until it's my turn. Are you scared? Ethan had asked with startling perception. The question had caught Marcus off guard. Was he afraid? Not of the cancer itself, but perhaps of the reckoning that awaited him beyond that door, the confrontation with choices made years ago and their consequences. A little, he'd admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. Ethan had nodded sagely. Mommy says it's okay to be scared sometimes. Even grown-ups get scared. Then, with a gesture that had pierced something in Marcus's chest, the boy had reached out and patted his shoulder. It'll be okay, Daddy. Now, left alone with his thoughts in the sterile hallway, Marcus wrestled with emotions he'd spent decades suppressing. Anger at Catherine for keeping his son from him, guilt at the realization that 6 years ago he might have rejected the responsibility of fatherhood, fear that he might still be fundamentally incapable of being what Ethan needed, and beneath it all, a strange, growing sensation he couldn't quite name, like a door opening to a room he hadn't known existed within himself. His phone buzzed with urgent messages. The Japanese investors were threatening to pull out after yesterday's cancelled dinner. The London team needed approval on a time-sensitive acquisition. The board wanted an emergency meeting about the Shanghai expansion. The well-oiled machine of his corporate empire was beginning to sputter without his constant attention. For the first time in his career, Marcus let the notifications accumulate without response. Those problems belonged to a different man. The man he had been yesterday morning, before a phone call from a kindergarten had changed everything. After what seemed like an eternity, the door to Catherine's room opened, and the nurse stepped out with Ethan, whose eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "Mummy wants to see you now," he said to Marcus, his voice small but steady. "She said I should wait out here with Miss Jenny and draw her a special picture." The nurse, presumably Miss Jenny, smiled kindly. "We'll be fine out here, won't we, Ethan? I hear you're quite the artist." Marcus stood, straightening his tie in a reflexive gesture. "Is she?" he began, uncertain how to phrase the question. "Awake and lucid," the nurse supplied, "but very weak. Try not to upset her." The warning felt unnecessary, yet Marcus nodded. What could he possibly say to upset a woman already facing the ultimate finality? Catherine's room was dimly lit, the harsh hospital reality softened by the glow of a small lamp. The woman in the bed barely resembled the Catherine Wells he remembered, the confident attorney with quick wit and expressive eyes. This Catherine was a shadow, her once vibrant features sharpened by illness, her head covered by a pale blue scarf. Yet when she turned toward him, her eyes were the same, intelligent, direct, seeing more than most. "Marcus," she said, her voice thin but steady. "You came." He moved to her bedside, uncertain of the protocol for such a reunion. "You didn't give me much choice," he replied, then immediately regretted the accusatory tone. She smiled faintly, still direct as ever. "Please, sit." She gestured weakly to the chair beside her bed. Marcus sat, uncomfortably aware of the distance between them, not just physical, but the expanse of years and secrets and choices. "You look well," she said. "Success suits you." "You look," he faltered, unwilling to lie but unable to voice the brutal truth. "Terrible," she supplied with unexpected humor. "It's okay, Marcus. We're well past the point of flattery." A silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Catherine broke it first. "You've met him." Not a question, but a statement. "Yes. And?" Marcus met her gaze directly. "He has my eyes." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "Among other things. Your analytical mind, your stubbornness, your focus when something interests you. He's very much your son, Marcus." The confirmation, though expected, still landed with weight. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, the question that had burned in him since yesterday emerging with less heat than he'd anticipated, more weariness than accusation. Catherine's gaze drifted to the window, where afternoon light filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across her hospital bed. "I intended to," she said finally. When I first found out, I drafted a dozen different messages to you. But then what? Then I saw the announcement of your company's IPO. Your face was on the cover of Fortune talking about your 5-year expansion plan, your vision for revolutionizing the industry. You looked fulfilled, complete. I knew what a child would mean to your carefully structured existence. Marcus leaned forward. That wasn't your decision to make, wasn't it? Her eyes flashed with a momentary glimpse of the old Catherine. Tell me honestly, Marcus. If I had called you 6 years ago and said I was pregnant, what would you have done? The question forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth. 6 years ago, Marcus Harrington had been entirely consumed by his company's growth, working 20-hour days, sleeping in his office more often than his apartment. The child would have been an inconvenience at best, a disaster at worst. I would have provided financial support, he said finally. Catherine nodded, as though his answer confirmed something. But not emotional support, not presence, not the things a child actually needs. She sighed, the sound rattling slightly in her chest. I didn't want Ethan to grow up feeling like an obligation, an inconvenience, to be managed by your executive assistant and addressed quarterly like a business report. The assessment stung, partly because Marcus couldn't definitively claim it was wrong. So instead, you decided he should grow up without a father at all, he countered. No, she said softly. I decided he should grow up with a mother who could give him her full attention and love during his formative years, and then, when the time was right, meet a father who might be ready to see him as more than an interruption. Marcus absorbed this, trying to reconcile his anger with the logic of her position. And you determined that the right time was when you were dying, when you no longer had a choice but to turn him over to a stranger. Catherine winced, not at his tone, but at the harsh reality of his words. The cancer diagnosis changed everything. Suddenly, the careful timeline I'd imagined disappeared. I had months, not years. So yes, I accelerated the plan. By making legal arrangements without my knowledge or consent. By preparing him to expect me to welcome him with open arms. Marcus couldn't keep the edge from his voice. What if I'm not capable of being what he needs, Catherine? What if I'm exactly the man you feared I was 6 years ago? Her gaze softened. But you're not, are you? You're here. You came when the school called. You took him home. You brought him to see me. She reached out a frail hand, which Marcus found himself taking without conscious decision. You may not know it yet, Marcus, but you've already begun to change. The certainty in her voice unsettled him. I run a global corporation. My life isn't structured for parenthood. I have no idea how to raise a child. No one does at first, she replied. We all learn as we go. Her expression grew more serious. I know I've put you in an impossible position, and for that I'm sorry. You can refuse guardianship. My mother would take him, though at 72, raising a young child would be difficult for her. The alternative hung between them, unspoken but clear. Ethan could enter the foster system, a boy with no parents, set adrift in a world that often had little compassion for children without advocates. Marcus looked at their joined hands, her thin, pale fingers enclosed in his larger ones. Despite the years and circumstances that separated them, he felt the ghost of the connection they'd once shared. Did you ever? He began, then paused, uncertain if he wanted the answer. Did you ever regret not telling me sooner? Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Every birthday, she said finally. Every time he did something remarkable, or said something that reminded me so much of you. Every time he asked about his father. Her eyes glistened. But regret is a luxury the dying can't afford, Marcus. All I can do now is try to secure his future the best way I know how. By forcing my hand, he said, but the words lacked bite. By giving you both a chance, she corrected gently. I've told him so many stories about you, Marcus. The brilliant MIT student who built his first computer at 8. The visionary who saw possibilities where others saw roadblocks. The man who climbed mountains on his rare days off because he said it helped him think more clearly. Marcus felt something catch in his throat. She'd been creating a mythology for Ethan, not the cold, work-obsessed reality of Marcus Harrington, CEO, but a father worthy of admiration and love. I don't know if I can be that man, he admitted. You don't have to be. You just have to be present, to try. Her grip on his hand tightened slightly. Did you read my letter? He shook his head. Not yet. Read it when you're ready. It explains more than I have strength for now. Her eyes drifted closed briefly, fatigue evident in every line of her face. They're giving me morphine for the pain. It makes it hard to stay focused. You should rest, Marcus said, realizing with surprise that he was reluctant to leave. Her eyes opened again, suddenly urgent. Before you go, there's something I need to know. Not as Ethan's mother, but just for me. She searched his face. In those 3 months we had together, was any of it real for you? Or was I just a pleasant diversion from work? The question caught him off guard with its vulnerability. Catherine had always projected such strength, such self-sufficiency. Even when he'd ended their relationship, she'd accepted it with dignity, without revealing any wound. It was real, he said quietly, giving her the truth she deserved. More real than I was comfortable with. That's why I ended it. Doom. A small, sad smile touched her lips. I suspected as much. The great Marcus Harrington, afraid of something after all. Terrified, he admitted. She nodded, her eyes drifting closed again. Ethan will need to come back tomorrow. I've been saving my strength for his visits. Understanding the dismissal, Marcus rose to leave, but her voice stopped him at the door. Marcus, when I'm gone, tell him stories about me sometimes. Not just the end part, the good parts. Be turned back, taking in the fragile figure in the hospital bed, the mother of his child, a woman he might have loved in another life, with different choices. I will, he promised, realizing as he said it that he meant it completely. In the hallway, he found Ethan sitting cross-legged on the floor with the nurse, putting finishing touches on a drawing. The boy looked up at Marcus's approach, his expression solemn beyond his years. Did you and Mommy have a good talk? He asked. Marcus nodded, finding himself kneeling to Ethan's level again, a gesture that was becoming strangely natural. Yes, we did. She's very tired now, but she said you can come back to see her tomorrow. Ethan nodded, accepting this with the resilience children often show in impossible situations. I drew her a picture of all of us, he said, holding up his artwork. See, that's Mommy, and me, and you, and that's our house with the swimming pool, and that's the sky house too, way up high. The drawing showed stick figures holding hands between two houses, one clearly meant to be Marcus's Connecticut estate, the other a tall rectangle representing the penthouse. A family united across two homes, a future that could never exist now. It's perfect, Marcus said, his voice rough. She'll love it. Standing, he took Ethan's hand, an automatic gesture now. Let's give your drawing to the nurse to keep safe for Mommy tomorrow, and then we'll go get some lunch. How does that sound? Can we have hamburgers? Ethan asked. Mommy only lets me have them sometimes, but she said when I'm with you, we can make new rules. The simple request, framed within Catherine's careful preparation for the transition of care, made something twist in Marcus's chest. Yes, he said, we can have hamburgers. As they walked down the hospital corridor, Ethan's small hand in his, Marcus felt his phone vibrating continuously in his pocket, the demands of his previous life growing more insistent. Decisions would need to be made soon about the company, about his role, about how to balance the responsibilities of his corporate empire with the even more daunting responsibility of raising a child. But those were tomorrow's problems. Today, he would have hamburgers with his son. The call came at 3:17 a.m., pulling Marcus from a fitful sleep. Catherine Wells had passed away peacefully in her sleep. No pain at the end, the nurse assured him. Just a gentle slipping away as the morphine kept her comfortable through those final hours. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed in the darkness, phone still in hand, the nurse's kind words echoing in his mind. He had expected this call, had been preparing for it since that first hospital visit 3 days ago, yet the finality of it still struck him with surprising force. Catherine was gone, the brilliant attorney who had challenged his thinking, who had walked away from him with dignity, who had made the momentous decision to keep his son from him, and then, in her final act, to return that son to his life. She was gone. And with her, any possibility of further explanations, reconciliations, or understanding. Her unfinished letter sat on his nightstand, trailing off mid-sentence, as though she had been interrupted while writing it, or perhaps simply too exhausted to continue. Take care of our son, Marcus, and in doing so, perhaps you might discover a part of what? Himself, his capacity for something beyond ambition and achievement. He would never know exactly what Catherine had meant to say. Across the hallway, Ethan slept peacefully in the guest room that was rapidly transforming into a child's bedroom. In the 3 days since their first hospital visit, Diane had arranged for child-appropriate furniture, bedding, toys, and clothes to be delivered. The formerly austere space now featured a rocket ship lamp, solar system wall decals, and shelves filled with books about space, dinosaurs, and marine biology. Ethan's current obsessions, according to the notes Catherine had left in his blue box of memories. How would he tell a 5-year-old that his mother was gone forever? Marcus had no framework for such a conversation, no experience with grief beyond his own stoic processing of his father's death decades ago. That approach, bottling emotions, focusing on practicalities, would not work with a sensitive child like Ethan. Marcus slipped on a robe and walked quietly to Ethan's room, easing the door open to check on him. The boy slept curled around his stuffed elephant, one arm flung outward as though reaching for something. His face in sleep looked even more like Catherine's, the same curve of cheek, the same slightly upturned nose. In waking hours, he was unmistakably Marcus's son, but in sleep, he was his mother's child. For a long moment, Marcus simply watched him breathe, this small person who was now entirely his responsibility. The weight of that truth pressed down on him with physical force. Every decision about Ethan's future, his education, his health, his emotional well-being, his development into adulthood, now rested solely with Marcus. The magnitude of it was terrifying. He returned to his bedroom and retrieved his tablet, opening a new document. If there was one thing Marcus Harrington excelled at, it was planning. Systematically addressing problems, breaking down seemingly insurmountable challenges into manageable parts. He began to type, creating headings for immediate needs, short-term adjustments, and long-term considerations. Immediate. Inform Ethan about Catherine, research child-appropriate ways to discuss death, funeral arrangements, coordinate with Catherine's mother, emotional support for Ethan, child psychologist referrals, time off work, delegate key responsibilities. Short-term, kindergarten arrangements, continue at Brightwaters or transfer closer to Penthouse. Legal formalization of, guardianship, follow up with Olivia Chen, living arrangements, make Penthouse more child-friendly, Connecticut house better for weekends, childcare nanny, background checks, experience with grief, educational qualifications, long-term, work-life balance restructuring, possible COO hire to reduce daily operational burden, educational planning, research top private schools, future trajectory, estate planning updates, established trust for Ethan, parenting skills development, books, classes, support groups for single fathers. The list grew longer as Marcus's analytical mind processed the multitude of changes and decisions ahead. By the time dawn began to lighten the sky outside his wall of windows, he had created a comprehensive roadmap for transitioning from solitary CEO to single father. On paper, at least, the path forward appeared manageable. In reality, Marcus knew that no amount of planning could prepare him for the emotional complexities of the journey he was embarking on. His phone buzzed with a message from Diane, already awake and working despite the early hour. "I'm deeply sorry to hear about Ms. Wells. I've cleared your schedule for the next week and arranged for VP Chen to handle the Tokyo negotiations. The board has been informed you're dealing with a family emergency and will be working remotely when possible. A child grief counselor will be available to meet with Ethan today at whatever time you think best. Arrangements for Ms. Wells are being coordinated with her mother per your instructions. Do you need anything else immediately?" Marcus replied with thanks and a request for breakfast delivery that would include Ethan's preferred Cheerios and bananas. Then he showered and dressed in casual clothes rather than his usual suit, another small concession to the new reality of his life. By the time he emerged from his bedroom, he heard movement in the kitchen. Following the sound, he found Ethan attempting to reach a glass from a cabinet, standing on tiptoes on a chair he'd apparently dragged from the dining table. "Ethan," Marcus said, moving quickly to steady the wobbling chair. "That's dangerous. If you need something, you should ask for help." The boy looked up at him with those familiar green eyes. "I was trying to get water. I always get my own water at home." Home. Catherine's apartment, where things had been arranged at a child's height, where independence had been encouraged within safe parameters. Another adjustment to add to Marcus's ever-growing list. "I understand," he said, lifting Ethan down from the chair. "But this kitchen isn't set up for you yet. We'll rearrange things so you can reach what you need safely, okay? For now, I'll get you water." As he filled a glass, Marcus noticed Ethan studying him with unusual intensity. "Did something happen?" the boy asked suddenly. "You look sad, and you're wearing different clothes." Children missed nothing, it seemed. Marcus had assumed he would have more time to prepare, to consult with the grief counselor before having this conversation. But Ethan's perception had forced his hand. "Let's sit down," he said, guiding Ethan to the sofa in the living room. "I do have something important to tell you." Ethan climbed onto the sofa, his expression serious beyond his years. "Is it about Mommy?" Marcus sat beside him, turning to face the boy directly. "Yes," he said, keeping his voice gentle but steady. "I got a call from the hospital very early this morning. Your mother, she was very, very sick, as you know." Ethan nodded solemnly. "The doctors couldn't fix her." "That's right. They tried everything they could, but the illness was too strong." Marcus paused, gathering courage for the words that needed to be said. "Ethan, your mother died last night. She went very peacefully in her sleep. She wasn't in any pain." The boy's face remained unnervingly still, processing. "Died means she's not coming back," he said finally. Not a question, but a statement of understanding. "Yes," Marcus confirmed, watching carefully for signs of distress. "Her body stopped working because of the illness, but she loved you very, very much. She made sure you would be taken care of." Ethan looked down at his hands, small fingers twisting together. "By you?" he said. "She said you would be my daddy forever now." "That's right." Marcus hesitated, then added, "I know this is very sad news. It's okay to feel upset or to cry or to ask questions. There's no right or wrong way to feel." The boy seemed to consider this, then looked up with eyes that were dry but filled with a profound sadness that made him appear much older than his 5 years. "I knew she was going to heaven," he said quietly. "She told me when the doctors first made her stay at the hospital. She said she would watch me from heaven and that she would always love me, but that I would live with you and you would take care of me and love me too. The careful preparation Catherine had done, preparing her son for the inevitable even while protecting him from the full weight of understanding, struck Marcus with fresh admiration for her courage and foresight. "Did she tell you that?" he asked gently. Ethan nodded. "She made me promise to be brave and to help you learn how to be a daddy, because you never got to practice before." A small smile flickered across his face. "She said you're super smart, but that you don't know much about kids." Despite the gravity of the moment, Marcus felt a small, sad laugh escape him. "Your mother was right about that." Ethan's lower lip trembled slightly. "I miss her." Without thinking, acting purely on instinct, Marcus opened his arms. "Come here," he said softly. The boy moved into his embrace, small body pressing against Marcus's chest. For a moment he was still, and then the dam broke. Ethan's shoulders began to shake with silent sobs, his tears soaking into Marcus's shirt. Marcus held him, one hand cradling the back of Ethan's head, the other rubbing gentle circles on his small back. He said nothing, recognizing that no words could ease this particular pain. He simply held his son as grief worked its way through the small body in waves of sorrow. Eventually the sobs quieted, and Ethan's breathing slowed. Still, Marcus continued to hold him, feeling the weight of the child in his arms, the trust implicit in the way Ethan had turned to him for comfort. "What happens now?" Ethan asked finally, his voice muffled against Marcus's chest. It was the question Marcus had been asking himself since 3:17 a.m., since that first call from Brightwater's kindergarten, really. What happens now? How does a driven, solitary, emotionally guarded man transform into a father? How does a life built around corporate achievement reshape itself to accommodate homework help and bedtime stories and a child's boundless questions? The answer, he realized, was the same one that had guided his business success, one step at a time, with careful planning, but also the flexibility to adapt when plans inevitably collided with reality. "Now," Marcus said gently, "we figure it out together, day by day. It won't always be easy, and we'll both make mistakes, but we'll learn together. That's what happens now." Ethan pulled back slightly to look at him, tear tracks glistening on his flushed cheeks. "Promise?" Marcus met his son's gaze, those eyes so like his own, and made the most sincere commitment of his life. "I promise." The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of breakfast and pulling them both from the moment. As Marcus moved to answer it, Ethan's small voice stopped him. "Daddy?" The word still sent a strange jolt through Marcus, a mixture of wonder and terror, and something else he couldn't quite name. "Yes? I'm going to help you learn how to be a really good daddy. Mommy said I could." For the first time since that life-altering phone call from the kindergarten, Marcus felt something shift inside him, a glimmer of hope that perhaps, with his son's help, he might indeed learn to become the father Ethan deserved. 6 weeks had passed since Catherine's funeral, a tasteful, intimate service that Ethan had attended holding tightly to Marcus's hand. 6 weeks of profound adjustment as Marcus Harrington, CEO and newly minted single father, attempted to reconcile his former existence with his current reality. Today marked yet another turning point. After weeks of working remotely and delegating heavily, Marcus was scheduled to return to Apex Technologies headquarters for an emergency board meeting that could not be conducted virtually. The issue at hand was Marcus himself, or more specifically, how the company would adapt to its founder and CEO's dramatically altered personal circumstances. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" Marcus asked, kneeling to straighten Ethan's small blazer. The boy looked remarkably grown up in his private school uniform, navy jacket, gray shorts, white shirt, and striped tie. Brightwater's kindergarten had been left behind in favor of Wellington Academy, an elite school just 15 blocks from the penthouse, where Ethan had been accepted mid-semester through a combination of his test scores and, Marcus suspected, a substantial donation. "I'll be fine," Ethan assured him, with a serious expression that sometimes made him appear decades older than his 5 years. "Miss Abigail will pick me up after school and bring me to your office. We practiced yesterday, remember?" Ms. Abigail was the child development specialist and professionally trained nanny that Marcus had hired after interviewing 17 candidates. She had a master's degree in early childhood education, experience working with children who had lost parents, and a calm, no-nonsense demeanor that both Marcus and Ethan had responded to immediately. "I remember," Marcus said, "but if you need me before then, I press the special button on my watch and it calls you right away," Ethan recited patiently, showing the smartwatch Marcus had modified specifically for this purpose, but only for real emergencies. "That's right." Marcus found himself reluctant to let go, to separate from Ethan even for these few school hours. It was an unfamiliar feeling, this constant awareness of another person's well-being, this persistent concern that something might go wrong in his absence. Diane cleared her throat gently from the foyer. "Sir, the car is waiting. We should leave in the next 5 minutes to ensure you arrive on time for the pre-meeting with legal." Marcus nodded. "Thank you, Diane." He turned back to Ethan. "Have a good day at school. I'll see you at my office around 3:30. "Okay," Ethan said, then unexpectedly threw his arms around Marcus's neck in a quick hug. "Don't worry, Daddy. Today is an important day for your company. Mommy said sometimes you have to do hard things to protect what you built." The reference to Catherine's guidance from beyond the grave no longer surprised Marcus. Ethan often quoted his mother's wisdom, as though Catherine had spent her final months preparing him with a lifetime's worth of lessons, delivered in advance. "Your mother was a very smart woman," Marcus replied, returning the hug with a still unfamiliar ease. 6 weeks ago, physical affection had felt awkward, foreign. Now it was becoming as natural as breathing. 20 minutes later, Marcus entered the familiar glass tower of Apex Technologies for the first time in over a month. The security guards nodded respectfully. Employees stepped aside with murmured greetings, and longtime colleagues offered warm handshakes or subtle nods of sympathy as he made his way to the executive floor. His office appeared exactly as he'd left it the day of that fateful call, pristine, ordered, the epitome of corporate efficiency. Yet it felt like a museum exhibit of someone else's life, a perfectly preserved relic of Marcus Harrington version 1.0. Olivia Chen, his family attorney, was waiting along with Gerald Watkins, Apex's chief counsel. Both rose as he entered. "Marcus," Olivia greeted him with the familiarity that had developed over weeks of intensive legal work. "Good to see you in person. How's Ethan adjusting to the new school?" "Well, so far," Marcus replied, setting his briefcase on the desk. "He's resilient." "Like his father," she observed with a small smile. "Are you ready for today? The board has questions and they deserve honest answers." Marcus nodded grimly. "That's why I'm here." Gerald cleared his throat. "Marcus, before we go in, you should know that Thomas Blackwood has been rallying support for a restructuring proposal. He's suggesting you step into a chairman role and allow the COO to assume day-to-day operations." Thomas Blackwood, the most senior board member and one of Apex's early investors, had never hidden his belief that personal entanglements were detriments to corporate leadership. His own 3 divorces were testament to his prioritization of business over family. "Not unexpected," Marcus said calmly. "What's the temperature in the room?" "Split," Gerald admitted. "Some see your new circumstances as a liability. Others believe your leadership remains essential, regardless of your personal situation." "And what do you think I should do?" Marcus asked, though he had already reached his own conclusion. Olivia and Gerald exchanged glances. "That depends," Olivia said carefully, "on what you want, both for Apex and for Ethan." The board meeting began precisely at 10 o'clock in the expansive conference room with its floor-to-ceiling views of Manhattan. 12 board members sat around the polished table, with Marcus at its head, his customary position, though it felt different today. Less like a throne, more like a witness stand. Thomas Blackwood opened the discussion with typical directness. "Marcus, we've all been patient during this personal transition. The company has weathered your absence reasonably well, though the Tokyo deal is suffering without your direct involvement, and the Shanghai expansion has hit regulatory snags that might have been avoided with more hands-on leadership." Marcus nodded, acknowledging these points without defensiveness. "The question before us," Blackwood continued, "is whether Apex Technologies can afford a CEO whose attention is now necessarily divided. You've built something extraordinary here, Marcus, but the company has reached a size and complexity that demands singular focus." Other board members nodded or frowned, their positions already established through private conversations and alliances formed in Marcus's absence. "You've circulated a proposal," Marcus noted, gesturing to the tablets before each board member, "suggesting I transition to chairman and elevate Jennifer Zhao to CEO. Jennifer has proven herself as COO, Blackwood replied. The markets would respond well to her promotion, especially with you remaining as chairman to provide continuity and strategic vision. Marcus let his gaze travel around the table, making eye contact with each board member. These were people he had selected, investors who had believed in his vision, executives who had helped build Apex into a global powerhouse. They deserved his honesty. 6 weeks ago, he began, I received a phone call that changed my life. I discovered I had a son I never knew existed, and within days became his sole parent through circumstances I could never have anticipated. He paused, allowing the personal nature of this statement to register. Marcus Harrington rarely spoke of personal matters in the boardroom. During these weeks, I've had to reconsider everything. My priorities, my schedule, my definition of success. I've had to learn an entirely new set of skills, and I've failed as often as I've succeeded. Being a parent, it turns out, is significantly more challenging than running a multinational corporation. A few smiles flickered around the table at this observation. I've also reached some conclusions, Marcus continued. First, that Thomas is right. Apex deserves leadership that can give it the attention and focus it requires to continue thriving. Second, that my son deserves a father who is present, engaged, and able to attend school performances without checking his email under the table. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a document, placing it on the table before him. This is my own proposal, which differs from Thomas's in several key respects. I am indeed stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. A ripple of reaction moved through the room. Even Blackwood looked surprised at Marcus's ready acquiescence. However, Marcus continued, I am not recommending Jennifer Zhao as my replacement. Blackwood frowned. Marcus, Jennifer has been groomed for this role. She knows the company inside and out. She does, Marcus agreed, which is why I'm recommending her for the position I'm creating, President and Chief Operating Officer of Apex Technologies Global. Jennifer will oversee all day-to-day operations, including the Tokyo and Shanghai expansions. And the CEO position, Blackwood asked, eyes narrowing, will be filled by Dr. Adam Chen, currently heading our AI research division. Adam understands our technology better than anyone, has published extensively in the field, and commands immense respect in the industry. With Jennifer handling operations and Adam focusing on innovation and strategic direction, Apex will have the best of both worlds. And your role in this new structure? Asked Patricia Gomez, another board member. I will transition to executive chairman, focusing specifically on long-term vision, key client relationships, and strategic partnerships. This role will require approximately 20 hours per week of my time, compared to the 80 I was previously dedicating to Apex. A murmur of surprise rippled around the table. Marcus Harrington, notorious workaholic, voluntarily reducing his involvement to part-time. Marcus, Blackwood said carefully, while I appreciate your thoughtfulness, I have concerns about such a dramatic reduction in your involvement. This company has been your life's work. It has been, Marcus agreed, and I remain deeply committed to its success. But it is no longer my only priority. He checked his watch. In exactly 5 hours and 17 minutes, my son will arrive at this building, expecting to see his father. Not his father's assistant, explaining that an urgent meeting ran long. Not his father on a video call from another country. His father, present and engaged. The boardroom fell silent as the implications of Marcus's statement sank in. I built Apex Technologies to change the world through innovation, Marcus continued. I'm proud of what we've accomplished. But if running this company requires me to sacrifice being a father to my son, then the cost is too high. Patricia Gomez was the first to respond. I believe Marcus's proposal has merit. With Adam's technical vision and Jennifer's operational excellence, the company remains in strong hands, and having Marcus focus on strategic relationships plays to his strengths while accommodating his new personal reality. Slowly, support built around the table. Even Blackwood, after raising several pointed questions about the transition timeline and reporting structures, eventually nodded his reluctant agreement. By early afternoon, the board had approved Marcus's restructuring proposal. Press releases were being drafted, key employees notified, and markets prepared for the announcement. Marcus sat alone in his office, staring out at the city below, feeling strangely unburdened. For 20 years, Apex Technologies had been his singular focus, his identity, his purpose. The prospect of stepping back should have terrified him. Instead, he felt a curious sense of rightness, as though a path had opened before him that he hadn't known he was seeking. At precisely 3:32 p.m., his office door opened, and Ethan burst in, still in his school uniform, but with the tie loosened and his hair slightly disheveled from the day's activities. "Daddy!" Ms. Abigail showed me the whole building. I saw where the computers are made and where the people test the new ideas, and even the big room where everyone eats lunch. And guess what? Tommy from my class said his dad works here too, and maybe we can have a play date. The enthusiastic report continued as Ethan circled Marcus's office, examining everything with keen interest. Ms. Abigail stood in the doorway, smiling apologetically at the whirlwind of energy she'd delivered. "It sounds like you had an exciting day," Marcus said when Ethan paused for breath. "Did you know this used to be where I spent most of my time?" Ethan nodded, running his hand along the edge of the massive desk. "Before you knew about me." "That's right." Marcus knelt down to Ethan's level, a gesture that had become automatic in recent weeks. "But I have some news. I won't be working here full-time anymore." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Are you losing your job?" Marcus smiled. "No, I'm choosing to change my job. I'll still be part of the company, but I'll be working less so that I can spend more time with you." The boy considered this with characteristic seriousness. "But you made this company. Mommy said it was like your other baby." "It was," Marcus agreed, "but companies, unlike children, can grow and thrive with multiple parents. I found some excellent people to help take care of Apex while I focus on being your dad." Ethan's eyes widened. "Really? You did that for me?" "For both of us," Marcus clarified. "Being a good father is important to me, and I couldn't do that while working 80 hours a week." Without warning, Ethan flung himself forward, wrapping his arms tightly around Marcus's neck. "Mommy said you'd figure it out," he whispered. She said you were super smart about fixing problems. Marcus closed his eyes, holding his son close, feeling the small heart beating against his chest. In that moment, the decision he'd made, which would no doubt generate headlines, affect stock prices, and become a case study at business schools, felt not like a sacrifice, but like the most logical choice he'd ever made. "Ready to go home?" he asked, as Ethan pulled away. "To the sky house or the swimming pool house?" Ethan asked. They had begun splitting their time between the Manhattan penthouse and the Connecticut estate, which offered more room for a child to play. "Actually," Marcus said, "I thought we might go look at a new house today. One that's not quite as high as the sky house and has more room for you to play than the penthouse, but is still in the city close to your school." "A new house? Just for us?" Marcus nodded. "Just for us. Somewhere we can build our life together." He stood, taking Ethan's small hand in his. "What do you think? Should we go see it?" "Yes," Ethan exclaimed, bouncing on his toes. "Is it as big as this building?" Marcus laughed, the sound coming more easily to him now than it had 6 weeks ago. "Not quite, but it has a garden and enough room for all your toys and books. And maybe even a dog someday, if you'd like that." "A dog?" Ethan's eyes grew impossibly wider. "Mommy always said maybe someday about a dog, but we couldn't have one in our apartment." "Agreed." As they walked through the executive floor, employees nodded respectfully, some doing double takes at the sight of Marcus Harrington holding a child's hand. The corporate titan and his 5-year-old son heading out in the middle of a workday to look at houses and discuss the possibility of a dog. In the elevator, Ethan looked up at Marcus with a sudden seriousness. "Daddy, are you sad about not being the boss of your company anymore?" Marcus considered the question carefully, knowing that his son deserved an honest answer. "Parts of it will be strange," he admitted. "It's been my life for a very long time. But no, I'm not sad. Some changes, even big ones, turn out to be exactly what we need." Ethan nodded, accepting this wisdom. "Like me coming to live with you. That was a big change." "The biggest," Marcus agreed as the elevator doors opened to the lobby. "And the best." As they stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, Marcus Harrington, former CEO, current father, felt a sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with quarterly projections or market expansions. For the first time in decades, the future stretching before him was beautifully, terrifyingly unknown, a journey he would navigate not alone, but with the small hand clasped trustingly in his. 3 months had passed since Marcus Harrington stepped down as CEO of Apex Technologies. 3 months of profound adjustment, unexpected joys, and challenges that no amount of corporate experience could have prepared him for. The brownstone on East 78th Street had become home, a 4-story testament to their new life together. Unlike the sleek, impersonal penthouse or the sprawling Connecticut estate, this house had been chosen with Ethan in mind. The 3rd floor had become entirely his domain, complete with a space-themed bedroom, a playroom filled with both educational toys and frivolous ones, and a small study where father and son often worked side by side. Marcus on his reduced but still significant Apex responsibilities, Ethan on kindergarten projects that were becoming increasingly sophisticated under his father's subtle guidance. Today was Saturday, and for the first time in his adult life, Marcus Harrington had no work scheduled. Saturdays were now sacred, dedicated entirely to Ethan, a commitment Marcus had made, and somewhat to his own surprise, kept without exception. "Daddy, is Grandma Helen going to like Max?" Ethan asked, kneeling on the floor of the living room, arms wrapped around the neck of a golden retriever puppy who responded with enthusiastic licks to his face. Maxwell, Max for short, had joined their household 3 weeks earlier, the final piece in the creation of their new normal. The dog had been carefully selected from a reputable breeder, his temperament perfect for a family with a child, his energy level manageable for their urban lifestyle. Marcus had never considered himself a dog person, but watching Ethan and Max together, he couldn't imagine their home without the creature's gentle presence. "I'm sure she will," Marcus assured him, though privately he wondered. Catherine's mother had been coolly correct in her interactions with Marcus, neither openly hostile nor particularly warm. The monthly visits she made from Boston to see Ethan were civil affairs, underscored by the unspoken reality that Marcus was raising her daughter's child, a child Catherine had kept from him until circumstances forced her hand. Helen Wells was due to arrive within the hour for her scheduled weekend visit. She would stay in the guest suite on the second floor, take Ethan to museums and child-friendly restaurants, and generally maintain her role as the last living connection to the mother Ethan still spoke of daily. "Remember, Max needs to be calm when Grandma arrives," Marcus reminded Ethan, reaching down to ruffle the puppy's soft fur. "Not everyone is used to dogs jumping on them. I've been teaching him to sit when people come in," Ethan said, demonstrating by standing up and then commanding, "Max, sit." The puppy looked up adoringly, but remained standing, tail wagging enthusiastically. "He's still learning," Ethan explained with the patient tone of a seasoned dog trainer. Marcus smiled, recognizing his own tendency toward perfectionism in his son's determination. "Learning takes time," he said, a lesson he reminded himself of daily in his own ongoing education in fatherhood. The doorbell rang, and Max immediately bounded toward the sound, barking with excitement. "I'll get him," Ethan declared, grabbing the puppy's collar while Marcus went to answer the door. Helen Wells stood on the stoop, elegant as always in a tailored wool coat and practical heels, a small suitcase at her side. At 72, she retained the striking looks that Catherine had inherited, the same high cheekbones and clear eyes, though grief had etched deeper lines around her mouth and between her brows. "Helen," Marcus greeted her, stepping back to allow her entry. "Welcome." "Marcus," she acknowledged with a nod. "Thank you for having me." The formality between them remained, a tacit agreement to maintain cordial relations for Ethan's sake. "Grandma," Ethan called, still struggling to restrain the excited puppy. "Come meet Max. He's my new dog." Helen's eyebrows rose slightly at the sight of the golden retriever. "I see you've made another addition to the family," she commented to Marcus, a tone neutral. "A recent development," Marcus confirmed. "Ethan has shown tremendous responsibility with him so far." Helen nodded, then moved forward to greet her grandson, kneeling despite her elegant attire to accept his one-armed hug, the other arm still firmly wrapped around Max's collar. "Hello, my darling," she said, her voice softening as it always did for Ethan. "And hello to you too," she added to Max, who strained toward her with friendly interest. "Can I show Grandma my new space project?" Ethan asked Marcus, eyes alight with enthusiasm. "It's almost finished." "Of course," Marcus replied. "Oh, why don't you take Max to his crate first, and I'll help Grandma get settled in her room." As Ethan led the puppy away, Marcus picked up Helen's suitcase. "The guest room is ready for you. Would you like tea after you've settled in?" "That would be nice," Helen agreed, following him up the stairs. The formality between them had become almost comfortable in its predictability. They operated like diplomatic envoys from different countries, finding common ground in their shared love for Ethan, while carefully avoiding the more contentious topics that hovered beneath the surface. Until today. As Marcus set her suitcase in the guest room, Helen remained in the doorway, studying him with an intensity that was new. "Catherine's birthday is next week," she said abruptly. She would have been 41. Marcus stilled, caught off guard by the direct reference to Catherine. In their previous interactions, Helen had rarely mentioned her daughter by name, as though the shared grief was too raw for direct acknowledgement. "Yes," he said simply. "I know." Helen's gaze remained steady. "Ethan wants to do something to remember her. He mentioned it in our phone call last week. He was wondering if you would take him to the botanical garden. Apparently, Catherine told him it was her favorite place in New York. The Brooklyn Botanical Garden had indeed been Catherine's favorite. During their brief time together years ago, they had spent a rare free Sunday there, Catherine pointing out rare specimens with the same precision she'd applied to legal briefs. The memory surfaced unexpectedly, vivid and bittersweet. "Of course," Marcus said. "We can certainly do that." Helen seemed to be weighing her next words carefully. "I've brought something for him. And for you, actually." She reached into her handbag and withdrew a small leather-bound book, Catherine's journal from the year after Ethan was born. Marcus looked at the journal with a mix of surprise and wariness. "I thought you'd given us all of her writings already." "I kept a few things back," Helen admitted. "I needed time to come to terms with certain realities." The admission hung between them, a first crack in the careful facade of polite distance. "What changed?" Marcus asked quietly. Helen's eyes drifted to the hallway, where framed photographs now lined the walls, a carefully curated visual history of Ethan's life. Marcus had insisted on including many with Catherine, ensuring that his son's mother remained a visible presence in their home. "When Catherine first told me she was pregnant, I was shocked," Helen said, her voice low. "Not by the pregnancy itself, but by her decision to keep you uninformed. I argued with her about it, quite strongly in fact. I felt she was making a mistake, that despite your reputation for being work-focused, you had a right to know about your child." This revelation surprised Marcus. He had assumed Helen had supported Catherine's decision fully. "What made you change your mind?" he asked. "Catherine was persuasive," Helen said with a sad smile. "She showed me interviews with you, articles about your 18-hour workdays and single-minded focus on Apex. She argued that involving you would mean either rejection, painful for her and eventually for Ethan, or a complicated co-parenting arrangement with someone who had no time or inclination for family life." Marcus couldn't argue with this assessment of his former self. The man he had been 6 years ago would indeed have seen a child as at best a complication to be managed. "I reluctantly accepted her decision," Helen continued, "and when she became ill, I supported her plan to introduce you to Ethan, though I had serious reservations about your ability to transition from corporate titan to single father." She extended the journal toward him. "This contains her thoughts during Ethan's first year, her joys, her doubts, her occasional regrets about the choice she made. I've held on to it because I wasn't sure you deserved this insight into her thoughts. But after watching you these past months," Marcus accepted the journal, feeling the weight of it, both physical and symbolic, in his hands. "Thank you," he said simply. Helen nodded, then added with unexpected directness, "You've surprised me, Marcus. I didn't believe you could do it. Walk away from your position, rearrange your life, put Ethan first. I was prepared to fight for custody if necessary." The admission didn't shock Marcus. He had suspected as much from certain comments she'd made early on. "What changed your mind?" A small, reluctant smile touched Helen's lips. "Ethan did. Every time we speak, all he talks about is what you've done together, what you've taught him, how you always make time for his questions. And then there are the more telling details, the way he runs to you when he's hurt or scared, the easy physical affection between you, the evidence that you're truly present in his life, not just going through the motions." She gestured toward the hallway. "And this house. You created a real home here. Not a showplace or a substitute for the home he lost, but something new and specific to your relationship with him." Marcus was surprised by the emotion that rose in his throat at her words, unexpected validation from the one person who had every reason to doubt him. "I'm trying," he said honestly. "Every day, I'm trying to be what he needs." Catherine would be... Helen paused, composing herself. "She would be pleased," She always believed you had it in you, if circumstances forced your hand. The mention of Catherine's faith in him, despite having kept Ethan's existence secret for years, pierced something in Marcus's carefully maintained composure. "I wish she'd given me the chance sooner," he said, the words emerging before he could consider them. "I lost 5 years with him." Helen's expression softened further. She questioned that decision many times, especially as Ethan grew and began asking more questions about you. The journal talks about that. Her doubts, her guilt. She glanced at her watch. "I believe we have a space project to admire before tea." The diplomatic envoy had returned, the moment of genuine connection receding behind the established routine of their interaction. But something had shifted between them, a small but significant warming in the chilly détente they had maintained. That evening, after Ethan had fallen asleep and Helen had retired to the guest room, Marcus sat in his study with Catherine's journal. For nearly an hour, he simply held it, uncertain if he was ready for this intimate glimpse into the mind of a woman he had known briefly, but who had shaped his life so profoundly. Finally, he opened it, finding Catherine's familiar handwriting on the first page. "Ethan is 3 weeks old today. He has his father's eyes, so startlingly green against his newborn face. When he looks at me, I see Marcus looking back, and I wonder for the 100th time if I've made the right choice." Marcus read until dawn, absorbing Catherine's words. Her joy in motherhood, her occasional loneliness, her doubts about keeping Ethan from his father, her hopes for their son's future. Through her words, she became real again. Not just the woman who had kept his son from him, or the patient ravaged by cancer, but a complex, thoughtful person doing her best with difficult choices. In the final entry, written when Ethan was just over a year old, Catherine had written, "I saw Marcus on the cover of Forbes today, the solitary genius, they called him." The article praised his singular focus, his uncompromising standards, his ability to work without distraction. I found myself wondering what he would make of Ethan's first wobbly steps across our living room yesterday, or the way he laughs when I tickle his stomach, or how he stares in fascination at the birds outside our window. I still believe I made the right choice for now, allowing Marcus his unencumbered rise, giving Ethan my undivided attention. But someday, perhaps when Ethan is old enough to understand, and Marcus has achieved what he's striving for, I'll find the courage to bring them together. I have to believe that when Marcus meets his son, when he looks into those eyes so like his own, something will awaken in him that even he doesn't know exists. Until then, I'll keep these memories safe for both of them. A bridge across the years they've missed, a foundation for the relationship they might someday build. Marcus closed the journal as the first light of dawn filtered through his study window. Catherine had been right. Something had awakened in him when he met Ethan, something he hadn't known existed beneath the layers of ambition and self-sufficiency he'd built around himself. He moved quietly through the silent house, checking first on Ethan, who slept peacefully with Max curled at the foot of his bed, then pausing at the collection of photographs in the hallway. There was Catherine, smiling with an infant Ethan, then a toddler Ethan, documenting the years Marcus had missed. And there were newer photos. Marcus and Ethan at the Central Park Zoo, at Ethan's school science fair, building a snowman in Connecticut. A visual testament to the new life they were creating together, a life that would have seemed impossible to the solitary genius of that Forbes cover. Next week, they would visit the botanical garden for Catherine's birthday, honoring the woman who had connected them through her imperfect but ultimately loving choices. And perhaps, with Helen's unexpected thawing, their unusual family might continue to evolve, different from what any of them had imagined, but no less real for its unconventional origins. As the household began to stir, Max's eager morning whine, the soft sound of Helen moving in the guest room, the first birds greeting the day, Marcus Harrington, former CEO and current father, felt a profound sense of gratitude for the phone call that had disrupted his perfectly ordered life and forced him to discover the part of himself that Catherine had somehow always believed existed. 1 year to the day after that life-changing phone call from Brightwater's kindergarten, Marcus Harrington stood on the sidelines of a soccer field in Central Park, watching his son chase after a ball with a determination that mirrored his own approach to business challenges. Ethan's small legs pumped furiously, his face a mask of concentration as he navigated around opponents twice his size. "Go, Ethan!" Marcus called out, surprising himself with the volume and enthusiasm of his cheer. Beside him, Max sat attentively, the golden retriever now fully grown and impeccably trained, though still prone to bursts of excitement when Ethan was involved. The transformation of the past year was evident, not just in the easy way Marcus shouted encouragement, something the reserved CEO of Apex Technologies would never have done in public, but in his entire demeanor. Dressed in casual jeans and a sweater, rather than his former uniform of bespoke suits, hair slightly tousled by the autumn breeze, he looked relaxed in a way that still occasionally caught him by surprise when he glimpsed his reflection. "He's got quite the competitive streak," observed Adam Chen, now CEO of Apex Technologies, who stood beside Marcus with his own son, a teammate of Ethan's. "Wonder where he gets that from," Marcus replied with a self-deprecating smile. Their weekly soccer games had become a ritual, not just for Ethan, who had discovered a passion for the sport, but for Marcus as well. Here, among the other parents with their camping chairs and thermoses of coffee, he had found an unexpected community. People who knew him not as the founder of a tech empire, but simply as Ethan's dad. An identity he now wore with greater pride than any corporate title. On the field, Ethan executed a surprisingly skillful pass to Adam's son, who drove the ball toward the goal. The two boys had formed a fast friendship, initially through their father's connection, but sustaining it through genuine compatibility. It was one of many ways that Marcus's personal and professional lives had begun to blend in ways he never would have permitted before. The transition hadn't been seamless. There had been difficult days, times when Ethan's grief for his mother surfaced in unexpected tantrums or periods of withdrawal, moments when Marcus questioned every parenting decision, nights when the weight of sole responsibility left him sleepless and doubting. There had been professional challenges too. The restructuring of Apex had proceeded well overall, but there had been hiccups that required Marcus's intervention, board members who still questioned his reduced role, competitors who sensed weakness in the changing of the guard. But standing here now, watching his son play with uninhibited joy, Marcus couldn't imagine having made any other choice. The game ended with Ethan's team victorious, the boys celebrating with high fives and exaggerated victory dances. Ethan ran to Marcus, face flushed with exertion and triumph. "Did you see my pass to Michael? Coach said it was professional level," he exclaimed, still working on mastering certain multisyllabic words despite his advanced vocabulary. "Professional," Marcus corrected gently. "And yes, it was excellent. Your positioning has really improved." Ethan beamed at the specific praise. Another parenting technique Marcus had learned through careful observation and the parenting books that now filled a shelf in his study. "Can we get ice cream with Michael and his dad?" "That sounds like a great idea," Marcus agreed, exchanging glances with Adam, who nodded his agreement. "But first, water and a proper cool-down, like Coach taught you." As Ethan jogged off to complete his post-game routine, Adam turned to Marcus. "The board was impressed with your presentation yesterday. The strategic partnership with NeuralNet is exactly the kind of long-view thinking they've come to expect from you." In his new role as executive chairman, Marcus focused exclusively on Apex's 5 to 10-year horizon, identifying emerging technologies, potential partners, and market shifts before they became apparent to others. The reduced hours but highly specialized focus had proven surprisingly effective. Apex's stock had initially dipped when Marcus stepped down as CEO, but had since climbed to record highs as the market recognized the strength of the new leadership structure. "Sometimes distance provides clarity," Marcus replied. "Speaking of which, I've been meaning to ask, how did Jennifer handle the Singapore situation?" Adam smiled. "With her usual efficiency. The regulatory issues are resolved, and the expansion is back on schedule. She sends her regards, by the way. Says you were right about delegating more to the regional directors." Their conversation was interrupted by Ethan's return, water bottle in hand, and Max, trotting faithfully at his heels. "Ready for ice cream," he announced. The two fathers and sons, plus Max on his leash, made their way out of the park toward a nearby ice cream shop that had become a post-game tradition. As they walked, Ethan recounted the game's highlights in elaborate detail, his narrative occasionally supplemented by Michael's corrections or additions. "And then I remembered what you told me about anticipating where the ball will go instead of chasing it. And that's how I got that good pass to Michael." Marcus smiled at the evidence that his son actually listened to his coaching tips, something that still surprised him. In the corporate world, his guidance had been sought after and valued, but there was something uniquely satisfying about imparting knowledge to his son and seeing it applied. At the ice cream shop, the boys deliberated seriously over their choices, while the adults placed simpler orders. Marcus watched Ethan, now 6, soon to turn 7, as he carefully counted out his change from the allowance money he insisted on using for his own treat. Another lesson Marcus had implemented: teaching financial responsibility early. "Daddy," Ethan said as they settled at an outdoor table, ice cream cones in hand, "is tomorrow still our special day?" Marcus nodded. Every year, on the anniversary of Catherine's passing, they set aside the day for remembrance, visiting her grave in the morning, then spending the afternoon doing something Catherine had enjoyed. It had become an important ritual for them both, a way of keeping her memory alive for Ethan, while acknowledging the griefs that still occasionally surfaced. "Yes, we'll go to the cemetery in the morning, and then to the Museum of Natural History. Remember how your mother loved the dinosaur exhibits?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "She said the T-Rex reminded her of opposing counsel when she won a big case." Marcus laughed, picturing Catherine's mischievous smile as she made such a comparison. These small details about her, ones he'd never known during their brief relationship, but had learned through Ethan's stories and Catherine's journals, had helped him construct a more complete picture of the woman who had given him his son. After ice cream, they said goodbye to Adam and Michael, promising a playdate the following weekend, and began the walk home. Ethan, tired from the game and content with ice cream, held Marcus's hand without the resistance that had recently begun to appear in other public settings, a developmental sign of growing independence that Marcus both encouraged and secretly found wistful. "Daddy," Ethan said as they waited for a traffic light, "Tommy from school said his mom and dad are getting a divorce, and now he has to live in 2 different houses. Will I ever have to do that?" The innocent question caught Marcus off guard. "No," he said firmly, "that's not something you need to worry about. But what if you get married? Sarah's dad got married again, and now she has a stepmom." Marcus considered how to address this new line of questioning. Over the past year, there had been a few brief relationships, discreet dinners with women Diane had deemed appropriate, a short-lived connection with another single parent from Ethan's school. But nothing had progressed beyond a few dates, partly due to Marcus's busy schedule, but mostly because of his reluctance to introduce any disruption into Ethan's life. "If that ever happened," he said carefully, "it would only be with someone who would be a positive addition to our family, someone who would love you and respect our relationship, and I would talk to you about it first. It would be a decision we'd make together." Ethan seemed satisfied with this answer. "Grandma Helen says you're too picky. She told me that when she thought I was sleeping." Marcus suppressed a smile. His relationship with Catherine's mother had evolved considerably over the past year. The initial frost had thawed into a genuine, if sometimes challenging, connection. Helen now visited monthly and had spent both Thanksgiving and Christmas with them, gradually becoming a true grandmotherly presence in Ethan's life and, unexpectedly, something of a parenting advisor to Marcus. "Grandma Helen is entitled to her opinion," he said diplomatically. "I think it's okay to be picky," Ethan declared. "You should pick someone who likes soccer and dogs and knows about space stuff." "I'll keep that in mind," Marcus promised, amused by his son's priorities. As they approached their brownstone, Marcus noticed a familiar figure waiting on the steps. Helen Wells, elegant as always, despite the travel from Boston. Her visits had become more frequent lately, and though they were always announced in advance, she occasionally arrived earlier than expected. "Grandma!" Ethan called, breaking away to run the last half block. Max strained at the leash, equally eager to greet Helen, who had overcome her initial wariness of the dog to become a dedicated provider of treats and ear scratches. Marcus followed at a more sedate pace, watching the interaction between grandmother and grandson with quiet satisfaction. Helen embraced Ethan, listening intently to his rapid-fire account of the soccer game, while simultaneously fending off Max's enthusiastic greeting. "You're early," Marcus observed as he reached them. "The earlier train was available, and I've learned to seize opportunities when they arise," Helen replied. "I hope it's not an inconvenience." "Not at all," Marcus assured her. "We're just back from the game and ice cream. Ethan has homework to finish before dinner." "Oh, Dad," Ethan protested. "It's Saturday. And homework is due Monday," Marcus reminded him. "Better to finish it now than worry about it tomorrow when we have our special day planned." Ethan sighed dramatically but didn't argue further, another sign of the routines and expectations that had become established in their household. "Can Grandma help me with my history questions?" "I would be delighted," Helen said, following them into the house. History was always my best subject. The evening unfolded with comfortable familiarity, Ethan completing homework under Helen's guidance, Marcus preparing dinner, cooking being a skill he had determinedly acquired over the past year, Max alternating between napping and hopeful observation of food preparation. After dinner, they played a board game, a ritual for evenings when Helen visited. Then Marcus supervised Ethan's bedtime routine while Helen made tea. Later, with Ethan asleep and the house quiet save for Max's occasional dreamy whimpers, Marcus and Helen sat in the living room, teacups in hand. "He's thriving," Helen observed. "The confidence he showed with that homework. Catherine would be so proud." "He works hard," Marcus agreed, "sometimes too hard. I find myself reminding him it's okay to make mistakes, to take breaks." Helen's lips curved in a knowing smile. "Not unlike the reminders Catherine used to give you, from what she told me." Marcus acknowledged this with a slight incline of his head. "She was right about many things. She would be surprised by some of the changes in you," Helen said, her tone thoughtful rather than critical. The Marcus Harrington she described would never have missed a business opportunity to attend a child's soccer game. That Marcus Harrington didn't know what he was missing, Marcus replied simply. A comfortable silence fell between them, the kind that had gradually replaced the tense, formal interactions of their early relationship. Finally, Helen set down her teacup. "I have something to discuss with you," she said, her tone shifting to something more serious. "I've been considering relocating to New York." The announcement surprised Marcus. Helen had lived in Boston her entire life, had built her career as a university administrator there, maintained her circle of friends and her familiar routines. "Because of Ethan?" he asked. "Primarily," she acknowledged. These monthly visits, they're wonderful, but too brief. I miss so much between them." She hesitated. "And at my age, one becomes more conscious of time's passage. I don't want to miss these years of his childhood." Marcus nodded, understanding completely. The preciousness of these years with Ethan had become increasingly apparent to him as he watched his son grow and change with sometimes startling rapidity. "I think that would be wonderful for Ethan," he said. "He loves your visits. Having you here more permanently would give him another layer of stability, another connection to Catherine." Helen looked relieved, as though she had expected resistance. "I wouldn't interfere," she assured him. "I know you've established your routines, your parenting approach. I would respect the boundaries you set." "I've never worried about that," Marcus said truthfully. After the initial adjustment period, Helen had been scrupulously respectful of his role as Ethan's father, offering advice only when asked, supporting his decisions even when they differed from what Catherine might have done. "There's a condo available in a building about 10 blocks from here," Helen continued. "I've arranged to see it on Monday before I return to Boston. If it suits you, I hope you'll take it," Marcus said. "And if not, we'll help you find something that does. Ethan will be thrilled." Helen's eyes glistened slightly. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything. For being the father Catherine believed you could be." The acknowledgement touched him deeply. Helen's approval had come to matter to him, not just for Ethan's sake, but because she was the keeper of Catherine's memory, the one who had known her best. After Helen retired to the guest room, Marcus found himself drawn to Ethan's bedroom. He stood in the doorway, watching his son sleep, Max curled protectively at the foot of the bed. The scene before him, so domestic, so ordinary in its peacefulness, would have been unimaginable to the Marcus Harrington of 2 years ago. That man had measured success in stock prices, market share, and technological innovation. He had built an empire but lived in an emotional desert, unaware of the emptiness until a kindergarten's phone call had shattered his carefully constructed solitude. Now success looked different, measured in Ethan's laughter, in small triumphs like learning to ride a bike or mastering a difficult math concept, in the growing confidence with which Marcus navigated fatherhood. The company he had built continued to thrive under new leadership, his strategic guidance still valued, but no longer the center of his existence. Tomorrow, they would visit Catherine's grave, placing flowers and sharing memories. Ethan would tell his mother about the soccer game, about school projects and friends, and the puppy that had grown into a loyal companion. Marcus would stand slightly apart, giving his son space for this private communion, grateful to Catherine for the gift she had ultimately given them both, the chance to become a family, however unconventionally. As he turned to leave Ethan to his dreams, a small voice stopped him. "Daddy?" "Yes?" Marcus moved back into the room, perching on the edge of the bed. "I was thinking about Mom," Ethan said sleepily. "Do you think she knew this would happen?" "What do you mean?" "That we would be happy together, that you would be a good dad, and we would have Max and Grandma would visit and everything would be okay, even though she had to go away." The question pierced Marcus's heart with its innocent wisdom. "I think she hoped for it," he said carefully. "I think she made the best plans she could to make it possible." Ethan nodded, eyes already drifting closed again. "She was really smart." "Yes, she was," Marcus agreed, smoothing his son's hair back from his forehead, a gesture that had become second nature. "One of the smartest people I've ever known." "I'm glad she called you that day," Ethan murmured, slipping back towards sleep. "Best thing ever." As Marcus sat in the dim room, listening to his son's breathing deepen into sleep, he silently echoed the sentiment. That phone call, the one that had disrupted his meticulously ordered existence, the one that had initially seemed like an absurd mistake, had indeed been the best thing ever. The CEO, who had once defined himself by his solitary genius, had discovered a profound truth. Real success wasn't measured in corporate achievements or personal accolades, but in the connections we forge, the love we give and receive, the difference we make in the lives entrusted to us. Marcus Harrington, once known for his singular focus on building a technology empire, had found his greatest achievement in something far simpler and infinitely more complex: becoming a father to the son he hadn't known he had, and in the process, discovering the man he was capable of becoming. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What moved you most about Marcus and Ethan's journey, and what kinds of stories would you like to see in the future? Your support helps us continue sharing these emotional moments that remind us of what truly matters in life. Until next time, this is Theo Teller, grateful for your time and attention.